y'all know the saying, history repeats itself. But I have never been so violently slapped in the face by that than when I was watching Scouts Honor, the Secret Files of the Boy Scouts of America on Netflix. And holy shit, this was basically just like hitting rewind on what we are currently going through as a society in America. It is basically this current administration and the Epstein files, but like 10 years ago with the Boy Scouts. Now, I will say that I was not as familiar with the Boy Scout situation as I was with the Epstein files, and honestly, I don't think it got as much attention. It could be that I just wasn't paying attention or I wasn't as aware as I was of the Epstein files. If I had to guess, it's probably because it had to do with boys and not girls. There's still social stigma around that. Now, regardless, if you watch this documentary, it'll probably piss you off as much as it pissed me off. And it really focuses on the fact that rather than targeting the sex offenders within the Boy Scout community, not only did the Boy Scouts of America Association, the churches, and the government start targeting gay people and LGBTQ people, they consequently banned them from ever participating in Boy Scouts in general, equating gay folks to pedophiles. Now, that is a very similar sentiment that is going around in a lot of states and across the federal government right now, where transgender people are inherently pedophiles, drag queens are pedophiles, this, that, and the other thing. And so it's so obvious the parallel that is happening here, and how that started to kick off at the same time that the Epstein files came out, the same way that this rhetoric 10 years prior kicked off when the Boy Scouts of America Perversion files were being released and they were going to court for repeated sex abuse. On top of that, when you look at the affiliation that the Boy Scouts of America have with so many churches, the Mormon Church, the Catholic Church, Muslim churches, Jewish churches, I know it's technically like synagogue and mosque, but I'm just saying church in general. So all of those religions were invested in the Boy Scouts, but the most prominent one was the LDS, the Mormons. And they were the biggest backer of the Boy Scouts of America, to the point where they said, hey, you need to ban gay people out of participating in this, or we're not going to back you. And they equated that gay people were pedophiles. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the scandals surrounding pedophilia within the Mormon Church. Now, not all Mormons are pedophiles, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But there's a history there that needs to be acknowledged. Same with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church backed the hell out of the Boy Scouts as well. And so we're at a point now where we really can no longer, as Americans, sit here and say that our country is not built off of pedophilia. Like, it is. You have the Boy Scouts of America, who had probably more than 82,000 victims who were sexually abused over decades. And they're still operating. They're still operating as an organization. Okay? You have the churches. The Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, probably the most predominant ones that have had their own massive sex abuse scandals. You have the Epstein files. You have the government in all of these cases protecting, aiding, and abetting these institutions. It's not a coincidence. I know some people have been saying this for a long time, and it's like, wow, you're slow to finally hop on the train. But it is mind-boggling to think that we have a situation almost identical to the one that we are currently in just 10 years prior. And the same shit is happening all over again. And then when you watch the documentary and you see, I think he's the president or the vice president, McGowan, and you see the way that he talks about this shit, it makes sense. Because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He wants to protect the institution and he wants to make money. And that's what it boils down to. Because the entire time he's laughing and smiling about these terrible experiences that these young boys went through. And he sits there and he's like, oh, well, we brought girls into the program. Okay, cool. You didn't solve the solution about the boys being molested. Let's start bringing girls into this situation so that they also can be molested. And then he goes on to comment about the lawsuit that happened when they filed for bankruptcy and how it wasn't a cover-up because it was 82,000 people, but we don't even know if that's an accurate number. And then he goes on to say, but one was too many. Even though they haven't fundamentally changed policies until they went into bankruptcy. He even says, and I quote, "They cannot guarantee that no one will ever have an accident." He is equating sexual abuse, child molestation, to an accident. That tells you everything you need to know about the mentality of the individuals that are operating these massive institutions and have churches and the government in their back pocket. And I know I'm starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's like so hard to deny. And then come to find out the government never looked into this. There was no formal investigation. It was all settled civilly with the bankruptcy and the money being dispersed to victims. And you sit here and originally you're like, wow, I wonder why they didn't do that. But then you look at the way that the government handled the Epstein files and it's like, wow, that actually makes so much sense. We couldn't even handle the Epstein files. How could we possibly investigate and handle over 82,000 victims of sexual abuse and molestation? It is just mind-boggling. This documentary made me so angry because you sit there and you see these men, these brave individuals sitting there breaking down and crying and talking about the hell that they went through and the experiences that they had. And you can see that it still impacts them to this day. And here we are, 10 years later, and the same exact shit is still happening. At what point do we, I don't know, stop supporting these types of institutions? It's so ingrained in our society and our culture that I don't think we can ever get rid of it. Obviously you can't, right? Evil people are going to do evil things. But the fact that it is so embedded in our country is a problem. And it honestly needs to be looked into more than it is.